When you see a headline about an NBA superstar signing a $400 million Supermax contract, you're seeing a marketing number, not a financial reality. To the public, that player just secured generational wealth. To the bank account, that number is a dangerous illusion. We are going to conduct a forensic audit of the financial collapse of NBA royalty. We aren't here to talk about buying too many Ferraris or reckless nightclub bills. We need to expose the structural wealth drains that exist before a player even swipes a credit card. We're breaking down the revenue waterfall, the mathematical erosion that turns a 9-figure contract into a bankruptcy filing. We'll also uncover the counterintuitive safe bet trap, showing how mechanisms designed to protect wealth, like deferred compensation, can actually accelerate financial ruin if structured poorly. This isn't just about losing money. It's the difference between building a dynasty and becoming a cautionary tale like Delonte West. Let's deploy the revenue waterfall visualization. We start at the top with that massive $400 million figure. Before the ink is dry, the first slice disappears. Agent fees in the NBA are capped at 4%, which sounds small until you run the math. That is $16 million deducted immediately. The player never touches that money, yet it's often included in their taxable gross income, depending on how the deal is structured. Next, we hit the tax reality. Everyone knows about federal taxes, but the silent killer is the jock tax. An NBA player isn't just an employee. They are a traveling corporation doing business in 20 different jurisdictions. They have to file tax returns in every state they play in. California, New York, and Massachusetts take their cut based on duty days. This creates an administrative nightmare and an effective tax drag of 5 to 10% on top of federal rates. That's another $20 million to $40 million gone, simply for showing up to work. Most standard financial planners fail to optimize this because they are used to clients who live and work in one place. This is where the gross versus net blindness destroys careers. Look at Antoine Walker. He earned over $108 million in his career, but filed for bankruptcy with millions in debt. The narrative is that he was just a reckless spender. The reality is that he made financial decisions based on the headline number. If you think you have $100 million, spending $50 million feels safe. But when your actual net income after the waterfall is only $45 million, that same spending habit creates an insurmountable burn rate. Walker was operating a lifestyle for a $100 million corporation on a budget that had already been slashed by 55%. Then comes the 30% rule failure. Standard advice says to save 30% of your income. That works for a dentist. It fails for a shooting guard. An NBA player has the overhead of a mid-sized company. Personal trainers, private security, nutritionists, and the family payroll often consume 20% of the net income. You cannot save 30% when your fixed operating costs are already eating half your take-home pay. By the time the money actually lands in a personal account, that $400 million is closer to $100 million. And that's when the real danger arrives. Not from the government or the league, but from the people hired to protect what's left. Once the money has survived the initial waterfall of taxes and fees, the remaining capital faces its most dangerous threat, the people hired to protect it. To understand why so many athletes go broke, you have to grade their financial team the same way a board of directors grades a CEO. We call this the CEO scorecard, a framework to evaluate the player's personal front office, the agent, the business manager, and the CPA, on a scale of 1 to 10 based on fiduciary responsibility versus salesmanship. The most dangerous score usually comes from the business manager. In the corporate world, a business manager runs operations. In the NBA, this title is often a catch-all for a person who controls the checkbook but lacks regulatory oversight. This creates a fiduciary gap. A registered investment advisor is legally required to act in your best interest. A business manager operating on a commission structure is not. They are often incentivized to push deals that generate fees rather than portfolio growth. Take the case of Tim Duncan. On the court, Duncan was the big fundamental, intelligent, low ego, and disciplined. He wasn't buying tigers or private jets, yet he lost over $20 million to his financial advisor, Charles Banks. Duncan's scorecard failure was a lack of segregation of duties. Banks controlled the investments and the oversight simultaneously. He placed Duncan's money into illiquid private deals like wineries and hotels, where Banks had a personal ownership stake. Because there was no independent CPA auditing the advisor's moves, Banks was able to forge signatures and leverage Duncan's credit lines without detection for years. Duncan's team failed the most basic test of corporate governance, checks and balances. Then you have the Scottie Pippen case, which exposes the conflict of interest in the commission model. Pippen sued his advisors for over $20 million, alleging they churned his account to generate transaction fees and steered him into complex, illiquid investments. This highlights the private investment trap. Athletes are constantly pitched opportunities to buy into restaurants, car dealerships, or real estate developments. The pitch is always about generational wealth and equity. The reality is that these are high-risk, operationally heavy businesses. Data shows that athlete-backed ventures have an 80% failure rate. When a player puts $5 million into a restaurant franchise, that money becomes illiquid. It is gone from the balance sheet for 5 to 10 years. If the player retires or gets injured and the cash flow from the NBA stops, they cannot sell a failing restaurant to pay the mortgage. This illiquidity is what actually bankrupts them. They might be asset-rich on paper with bad investments, but they are cash-poor in reality. The advisors often take a finder's fee up front for closing the deal, leaving the player to hold the bag when the operational costs spike. A 10-10 financial team prevents this by enforcing a strict public versus private ratio, ensuring that the majority of wealth stays in liquid, boring, market-correlated assets that can be sold in seconds, not years. If the advisors don't lose the money, the contract structure itself might. This brings us to the most misunderstood mechanism in sports finance: deferred compensation. The media loves to cite the Bobby Bonilla model or the Allen Iverson Trust as the ultimate safety net. The story goes that Iverson, despite his legendary spending habits, was saved from total ruin because a clause in his Reebok contract locked away $32 million in a trust fund that he couldn't touch until age 55. In this specific narrative, forced deferral acted as a barrier between the player and his own worst impulses. It was a forced savings account that ensured a lifeline. However, for the modern player, deferred money is often a mathematical trap. We call this the deferral paradox. While it protects the principal from being spent, it exposes the wealth to two massive erosive forces: inflation and jurisdiction risk. Let's look at the tax trap of deferrals. When an NBA player signs a contract, they are taxed based on where they perform services. But deferred compensation is taxed based on where the player resides when they receive the money. This sounds like a benefit, but it often backfires due to poor long-term planning. Imagine a player spends his career in Florida or Texas states with zero income tax. If he defers $50 million of his income to be paid out after he retires, he saves the tax hit today. But if he retires and moves to Los Angeles or New York to pursue a broadcasting career, that deferred money is now subject to the new state's income tax. By moving from a 0% tax jurisdiction to a 13.3% jurisdiction like California, the player has voluntarily handed over nearly $7 million of that deferred pot to the state government. A competent strategy would have taken the money up front in the tax-free state. Instead, the safe bet of deferral turned into a massive tax liability simply because the player's post-retirement zip code changed. Then there is the time value of money loss. When a team defers salary, they are essentially taking a 0% interest loan from the player. If Kevin Garnett defers $5 million for 5 years, he isn't just waiting for the money, he is losing the investment growth that money could have earned. If the market returns 7% annually, that $5 million would be worth over $7 million in 5 years. By letting the team hold it, the player loses that $2 million in growth. The team keeps the interest, and the player gets paid in future dollars that have less purchasing power due to inflation. These golden handcuffs look like generosity from the team, helping a player manage cash flow, but they are often calculated business moves to improve the team's liquidity at the player's expense. The player bears the inflation risk, the default risk, and the tax policy risk. Unless the deferral comes with a guaranteed interest rate that beats inflation, which is rare in the NBA compared to baseball, the player is technically losing wealth every single day that money sits in the team's vault. The safe career path involves taking the money now, paying the tax now, and letting compound interest work for you, not your employer. The difference between a $400 million dynasty and a bankruptcy headline isn't luck, it's structural engineering. The only way to protect the bag is to dismantle the traditional entourage and replace it with a CEO scorecard strategy. You must separate the powers. The agent is the dealmaker. Let them negotiate the contract and nothing else. The CPA is the compliance officer. They handle the taxes and nothing else. The investment advisor is the growth engine. They manage the portfolio and nothing else. Never let the dealmaker be the investment advisor. Never let the advisor audit themselves. And never let the safe option of deferred money blind you to the math of inflation and tax jurisdiction. Wealth in the MBA isn't accumulated by the contract you sign, it is accumulated by the liabilities you minimize. If you want to see how this game gets even more complex, you need to understand how NFL signing bonuses are completely rewriting the tax code. Click here to watch that breakdown next.